powering trusted identities of the world's people, places, and things. Every day, millions of people in more than 100 countries use our products and services to securely access physical and digital places. Over 2 billion things that need to be identified, verified, and tracked are connected through HID Global's technology.
Hello again. Welcome back to our third or first or second, depending on what order you're watching in, Lunch and Learn series for Safe for Healthcare. This time we're going to talk about kiosks and really how we feel kiosks can help make, we say everyone's lives better, but we're going to get into that a little bit, just so everyone is all good. Kind of contextually aware of what we're going to be talking about today. So the last couple we've talked about inpatient facilities, outpatient facilities, largely in the context of patients and visitors. But today's going to extend a little bit into some other identities that may be coming into a healthcare organization that you're still wanting to keep track of who they are, where they're going, why they're here. Contractors and vendors being some of those primary ones. So again, Safe for Healthcare is really addressing a pretty broad spectrum of identities and physical access needs. And so with that, let's get started on our first topic here, team. So let's get kicked off with how a kiosk is complementary for a staff lobby. And Duane, you and I were talking about this, and that word complement is actually a really key word in this whole thing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I'm looking at it, and yes, it is a very strong word when it comes to this environment that we're talking about. Another word that we try to utilize when we talk about kiosks is augment that flow of patients and augment some of that work, that stress off of either your guest services individuals, and allowing some individuals who feel free that want to take advantage of the technology you have available for them.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit last time with the out service. Sorry, Darwin, I cut you off there. Kind of being able to flow visitors into kind of the vein they want to go based on maybe their proclivities or comfort with technology. But, being able to have the two coexist within a space, I think, is helpful for those types of populations. Darwin, what were you going to say?
So what I was going to add is that, it goes to help define that visitor experience, that patient experience, that even whether you're an inpatient or outpatient, or you are a vendor coming in, a medical sales rep. So you have all these populations where you have not only, you want to be able to keep them safe and to, have them to the flow, but it also helps with, this very common theme in the industry about workflow efficiencies, because, when you want that throughput, if you have a recurring visitor that you have their information and they feel comfortable with the kiosk, then, you have the opportunity of, reducing the lines on the visitor desk. Sometimes you have enough volunteers to man the desk. Sometimes the volunteers are not enough, especially if you combine that earlier. One of the webinars we were talking about the reporting and being able to understand the traffic patterns on your distinct visitor points. You can use the kiosks to make sure that, even when you are not fully staffed, you are still able to maintain an acceptable throughput, because, the last thing that you want is, you try to rush to get into either an appointment or trying to go visit a family member, that you're able to, have that quick, frictionless experience to help, move it that and achieve those operational efficiencies.
Yeah, you touched on something there. We kind of talked about it a little bit in previous ones, but that concept also of different individuals that are coming in and kind of giving them a workflow that's more specific to their needs. Maybe it's a different station. Duane, what are you seeing from some of the conversations you're having around customers, prospects, individuals within the industry thinking about how a kiosk can help kind of with the flow of different groups across a building, because a lot of these healthcare facilities are pretty massive, at least some of the ones I've been in. So how are they thinking about it from a, I guess, funneling of traffic kind of point of view? You go here, you go there kind of thing.
Yeah, so the kiosk is great for taking away or limiting that manual check-in process, or like Darwin said, freeing up the space of guest services so you don't have long lines, right? So it's a very good tool to be able to allow Matthew or Darwin or Anna to check in, grab their information, and then move about the facility. So we find that people are staring in kiosks because it's a way to relieve high populated areas and reduce stress by allowing individuals to, again, not have to wait on these long lines, but now you have kiosks that allows them to now facilitate an automated process to check in.
And, it's something that, yeah. I mean, but I see a lot of patterns, or not only in healthcare, but in other industries where people are getting more used to the idea of having that. Okay, I go and I just do it myself, and then I have to wait in line or anything. Just like good example is that anybody that has gone to a supermarket of some of the big box retailers, you check out your own purchases. Now there's no difference when you go into a kiosk in a hospital to get your badge, and especially for those routine visits that don't require like, for example, a person that has already been cleared to the checklist or is a recurrent visitor. We can make those visits efficient, and when we need to, so what that results is that then we can focus on those that are watch list hits. So they might be trying to get around to using the kiosk, but at the same time you protect your visitors, your patients, your employees by making sure that the controls that you have defined around watch lists and whatnot are still applied and to keep everyone safe.
Yeah, thinking of it as an extension, not a substitute, back to complementing. It's a way of extending kind of that program. And I think that goes back to what we started with. The word complement, I think, is important, because we often, something new comes about or something that's perceived as taking from, our individual roles, our contributing roles to an organization. In this case, it is meant to maybe free up a little bit of time, but that doesn't mean that the person at the front desk or the nurse taking inputs or incoming visitors isn't still going to be busy. I mean, I would imagine these are going to be in particularly trafficked places. Back to Duane, your comment on stress, to help relieve some of the stress in an overall lobby experience. I know a lot of those lobbies will get busy. Yeah, tensions can build and everyone feeds off each other. And so it's all just kind of an escalating, contributing factor to some of the overriding topics and, and top of mind today around workplace violence and things like that. So I think viewing it as a complement is so important, not a substitute. In fact, Duane, you were mentioning some of the ways, and this will kind of bridge into the next topic of considerations maybe a little bit. So, thinking about how staffed versus unstaffed, time during the day, rotations of people, what are you seeing and hearing from the industry around that? Is this something where they're reliant on a kiosk just during the day or just during the night, or kind of a mixture?
It's a little bit of a mixture. President management as a whole, when you come into organizations that don't have any type of tracking of visitors, they tend to, let's call it, pilot the system and probably the less congested time frame, which is typically overnight. And as it becomes more adapted, then they'll implement it during the day or during visiting hours and so forth. And then the same thing with the kiosk. You typically have your trial runs where It'll be there. And you think about it, you have, let's say it's the 70-30 rule, right? 70% of the people will use the kiosk. The 30%, I always use the example, my mom will not go to a kiosk and touch a kiosk. She's just not going to do that. And there are other people, whether it be age demographic or what have you, will not use a kiosk. They want to talk to a person, right? To Darwin's example, big boxes, they have checkouts. I often like to talk to a person at a cash register as opposed to using a kiosk. However, there's people who are in a rush to get out, so they don't want to talk. They want to use that technology and then move on about their day. So, I always say it's the 70-30 rule. 70% will use it, 30% will not.
And also, yeah. So, you also look at the population. There are some populations that are going to be more open to the technology. And, every organization, they have their true north goals and that patient-centered experience, that also all part of how we deliver that. And we help organizations through that.
Kind of takes me in a slightly different direction. So the topic for this one, or I guess the webinar title, includes the word everyone. And on the slide where we talk a little bit about SAFE, I mentioned contractors. Darwin, you mentioned contractors and vendors coming in, and kind of getting to some of the considerations. And Duane, what you were just mentioning, I imagine this is also a way for an organization to maybe push those contractors. Maybe they can come in through a different facility to help again with the flow of people, and they come in, they know they're going to have to do this, or they maybe can pre-check in or something like that, so they're able to get in and get through quicker. Kind of like when I go to the store and I have a thing of milk, I don't necessarily need to talk to someone after standing in a line with a person that has 40 pieces of groceries. So, from a consideration standpoint, what are a couple of the key things for each of you, just guidance-wise, keep top of mind when you're thinking about kiosks as a complement? Again, sticking with that word.
So you hit on a lot of good points, right? So we'll talk about the patient visitor side. Maybe a week ago we did best practices on outpatients, right? And that's another one that kind of goes hand in hand with the kiosk, because with the kiosk, these outpatient visits are typically 1 day in and out, and those are the kind of efficiencies that you're trying to provide in that healthcare environment, right? Someone to check in, get their eye appointment, get their vaccination or whatever it is, and they can go on about their business. That's one. Two, then you have vendors like myself or Darwin had mentioned, pharmaceutical sales reps that come in, or vendors, and you want them to be able to check in. Your example was great. There's a separate section where maybe there's not a manned desk, but there's a kiosk, and most of these vendors are required to, and again, policy driven, are required to check in at some point in time, and they can do that through the kiosk.
Yeah, that's a good point. Darwin, any thoughts you got?
So just to piggyback on Duane's comments, when you have a population like medical sales reps, or some type of vendor, like the guy that comes in to do maintenance on the CT scan machine, or you have long-term relationships with like consultants and whatnot, you can have a dedicated kiosk for them to check in that could be separate from your inpatients or your outpatients. The other considerations that you have to consider too is, when you're looking at implementing a kiosk, how does it look like for the customer? And on the previous slide, we saw a little tablet type device, encrusted in a pedestal. So they're partners, HID partners that have taken our portal and have are built to serve it from a hardware device, with the kiosk features on it. Now, another consideration, me being the engineering and recovery, I can tell you guys that you have to also think about the peripherals. So when you're considering the kiosk, you need to look at the hardware that you look at and what type of experience. Because a kiosk can be something as simple as having a desktop with a mouse, a keyboard, and a monitor that is opening to the web page. And our kiosk mode is served as a web portal, so it's web based. So you can open it from an Android device, an iOS a tablet, or a Surface tablet. There are recommendations sometimes is that if you need to have, if you want to connect a printer, you want to connect a barcode scanner, like will be the case of say that you have an outpatient appointment and they come in with a barcode to check in, we recommend to use a Windows-based device because it has the widest available hardware support rather than, maybe an Android on iOS that the hardware might be limited. You might just be able to capture a picture or, print a badge if possible. So those are some of the considerations that you might want to think of when looking at the hardware, or, some guys in a clinical setting, say in a doctor's office, people get handed a tablet. Now, also, with the thinking about COVID and transmission, then, also had to consider the type of kiosk and environment and make sure that you're able to sanitize it properly to make sure that everybody stays safe. So that's some of the other considerations that you had to think of when considering establishing kiosks.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think about kiosk could be almost a decomposed kiosk. Some of those pieces within a nursing station. I think of some of the floors I've been on with my kiddo. Sometimes they're really cramped, so you're not going to have space for, a 4 or 5 foot freestanding thing that'll just get in the way. But that floor may need an extra sticky badge or whatever for making sure dad is dad, or kind of whatever we're needing from that standpoint. So I think that's a good point of think about the space, think about the peripherals, wired versus Wi-Fi, access to power, all of those things that, you're going to want to be able to put in place. Is it in front of or behind firewalls? That's a completely different topic. We don't need to go into that one, but you mentioned outpatients a little bit, Duane. Any other scenarios you've run into that are kind of interesting at some of the customer types we have? We've got some that have commingled inpatient, outpatient facilities. Some have dedicated of each. Any other interesting scenarios you've run into that you think are worth highlighting?
So we have it. Obviously, there's the main one, which is was there from the beginning. Is we talked about vendors and contractors and pharmaceutical, medical sales. Those are all individuals that can either walk up and use the kiosk. They can scan with a pre-registered QR code and make it very automatic where they're checking in and are kind of hands-free or a very simple process to check in. And again, we talked about the outpatient, streamlining that. However, there's also one option with your inpatient. So oftentimes you have inpatients, they're in there for some extended period of time, and you have what they call pre-approved visitors. So those are visitors that can only visit that patient. So our solution with the kiosk can actually send them out a code and they can go to that kiosk and check in. Again, they don't have to go to the guest services desk. They can go directly to a kiosk, check in, print their badge, scan their ID, and walk their way up to visit their family friend. And obviously, this is a person who's been here before. They're on the approved list. They know where they're going. They don't need wayfinding because, again, this kiosk is not going to talk back to you. It's going to print out your information, and then you go on about your business, right? If there's more than you need to, maybe directions or find out what a cafeteria is after you check in, things like that, then you want to, make your way over to a guest services desk. Yeah, makes sense. I've been learning and understanding and finding out that, not necessarily learning, but, a lot of our clients that use, and even in visitor manager across the board, it's very difficult to manage the checkout process of any visitor management system. How do you stay honest? When you have to apply visitor restrictions on patients and locations and facilities, how do you keep that honesty? And it's all very, very difficult, right? Because what we find people doing today is they're calling the nurses station, right, from the guest services desk. So now you're trying to check, so Matthew's trying to check in, but there might be 2 people at that patient that he's going to see. So guest services is calling the nurse's desk or the nurse's station, and that's what she's doing. She's just sitting there waiting to answer phone calls to tell you how many visitors are in the room, right? No, that's not going to happen. So oftentimes you find that these guys are waiting some ridiculous times to go and see family members because they're waiting for individuals to check out. So with that kiosk, you have the ability to actually check out right at that bottom. So even if you're not using it for checking in visitors from a patient or an outpatient or even a vendor and contractor, it still holds a value of being able to control your checkout process, right? Again, let's talk about that 70-30 rule, where if it's there, chances are you'll probably get about 70% of the people that will check out. And we can make it very simple. Yeah. They can search by their name. If they have their sticky badge, they can use their sticky badge. Darwin just printed it. He had a barcode on there. Typically, all these kiosks will have a scanner. You scan your barcode, confirmation number comes up. You click 2 more buttons, and you're completely checked out. So that does help with the process of managing the checkout when it comes to the healthcare and the visitor management for healthcare.
Now, the checkout process itself, it's something simple. Just point out to the bottom of the screen, we have the checkout link. And that is not it doesn't involve a lot of friction or a lot of effort on the part of the visitor.
And that's probably something, back to our considerations and some of those things we're talking about, who's coming in certain floors and certain entrances, maybe patient-related visitors through certain points of ingress. I'm guessing then you also want to think about people flowing out, maybe being able to walk through a certain exit lane that goes maybe straight to the parking garage, but maybe you can't come in that way or whatever. Just a little tablet that lets them click a couple of times might be huge in terms of really understanding that population in a more real-time manner.
Yeah. I mean, look, as we always say, every healthcare facility is different. So if that situation is applicable, then you're more than likely, I would suggest something like this to assist with that checkout process. Oftentimes, right, hospital is supposed to be open and inviting, or the understanding of a hospital is open and inviting. So it's very difficult to restrict the amount of doors. COVID allowed them to do that, and a lot of facilities are trying to stay in that environment to keep their patients and their staff and anyone in the hospital safe.
Okay. All right. Any other final kind of thought, kind of touch on? And then I think we're done for the day. So I will reiterate for maybe what's the umpteenth million time, these aren't supplements to individuals and staff. This is a complement. It is a way to maybe reduce the burden that the staffed lobby has on 5 or 10, 20% for an individual, which can be huge at the end of the day. Relieves their stress, potentially relieves queuing, makes the experience better, streamlines the flow throughout the facility overall. And I think that's one of the things that kiosks are really helpful for, is that efficiency that you talked about at the beginning, Darwin. And then obviously just think about really what you're needing for a kiosk, the flow. Just like when you have a house party or you're thinking about your catering, you don't want to put things that stop people right by the door. You don't want people congregating right there by the door. So, think about the flow of people in your lobby. We've seen it, so I'm sure Duane, whether he likes to or not, could maybe say, I would put it maybe over there. But that's kind of what's my final thought. What are the two you have that you want to wrap up with, and then we'll all break for lunch.
I think you hit him on the head, Matthew. The efficiency is probably my number one. Obviously, with all these best practices, security is right up there, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to secure the areas, right? And then with kiosk and with any of this visitor management stuff, a good point, but people always overlook it, is signage, especially these new facilities that don't have visitor management. You'll be surprised how far signage and literature will go when you're just implementing these new policies and procedures at your facility.
You mean like a big sign in here, but
hey, we're looking to protect our areas in a better fashion. So this is what we're doing to protect you and your loved ones while while they're in the hospital or in our healthcare, you know?
It's a really good point. It was when I talked to a customer of ours in the greater Ohio River Valley area. That was top of mind for them, was presenting out to the community their role as an advocate for community, pushing and promoting safety for the security of the community. I think I said several words there redundantly, but it goes back to the healthcare networks being here for the community, so everyone being safe within it is a boon to the community as a whole. So I think it's a great point. Darwin, what do you want to wrap us up with?
You guys make excellent points. The other thing is to consider is making sure that you're considering what hardware do you want to do, like, when thinking about the experience of what services are you comfortable doing? Because you might be comfortable having a fully automated kiosk where I go in, put my information and I get my badge and I'll be on my merry way. But some environments, like for example a children's hospital, that might not be really an option depending on the local policies. So thinking about what hardware that you want to do and the flexibility of the different platforms that you can use. Some platforms will have more available peripherals than others, and that's okay, because depending on how your use case is developed, then you can leverage the technology that you're most comfortable with. And you, again, looking at that patient experience, that true north, that patient-centered care, visitor-centered care, where you can have just your branding and you are controls that don't feel like controls within your environment to keep everybody safe, and make sure that you have maintain good visibility on your environment, what's going on.
I appreciate it. Again, this was fun. I'm sure we'll do it again soon. Darwin, thank you. Duane, thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Roberta, thank you for hosting us, and we'll call it a day. Hope to see everyone again soon. And if you didn't, this was number 3 in our series. I can't count 3. This one's about kiosk. We've got one on outpatient, one on inpatient, and we hope you enjoyed. Have a good day.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.